Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Kimberly. How are you this morning? Wow, it's been quite a week. Quite a week, hasn't it? I don't know about all of you, but holy smokes, what a week it's been. Oh, goodness. Anyway, good morning. Welcome to a beautiful brand new Wednesday here in the Enchanted Forest. It's a little bit cloudy. I was out in the forest just a little bit ago and I could hear the trees. I call it singing and moaning. Some of the trees out in our pine forest especially are getting a little old and a little creaky, a little aged. And I was thinking to myself, some days it feels like that even in our human body, doesn't it? It can feel a little aged and creaky and croaky and but we just keep on keeping on. And Anyway, as I was standing out there this morning, walking Gabriel for his morning walk, thinking about those trees and how old they are, and thinking about the show this morning and the antiquity of who we are. And I think a lot of people right now are feeling that antiquity. Aren't we feeling like old? And maybe old in the bones, or just tired, or something of that nature. I don't know. Kimberly's saying it's been a long week. LOL. It has. Good morning, Chue. Hihane washte, Del Marie. Standing out there with all of those magnificent trees and thinking about how old they are, and thinking about how old I am in human years this time around, and thinking about how old I am really, how old we all are really. Yeah, it really gives you something to think about, doesn't it? And it goes along, of course, with today's shows. The ancestors are calling in our blood and in our bones, and they're calling us. And I believe that they've been calling us. And right now I do feel as though they're calling us to hold the light, to hold the frequency of love and balance and reason and ascension and the golden rule, right? We're all related. Mitakoye Oyasi. To hold that frequency here. Because I do think that we're on the precipice of something pretty doggone cool. And for many of us, makes me pause to think. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning. The way that our ancestors speak to us. This morning I received a gift in the mail. It was just delivered, which had me in the studio a couple of minutes late today. It's a beautiful gift. It's a stone wind chime. And I took it out of the package, and Todd said, well, isn't that just very African looking? I've got it hanging here in the office with me, and I said, it is African looking. It's very African, actually. And I'm talking about ancestors this morning. So for me, it was just a really nice reminder of my African ancestry and how far back our roots go. Del Marie is saying, OCD, old, cranky, and demented, comes with age. Good morning, Angie. Boy, that's for sure, isn't it? Old, cranky, and demented. It's just been a really wild week. And we now have, as of early this morning, a family member in the hospital. So it's been one of those long nights. You know how that is? You get the call at midnight, 1 a.m., and someone that you love is being rushed to ER. And so it's one of those where you keep a vigil all night. You keep a vigil. And you light a candle, and you put up your prayers, and the bloodline, right? What we do for those that we love, whether they're in our bloodline or not. Hey, Carla Jo Worth. Pretty astonishing time that we're living in. I like the feeling that the ancestors are with us, each and every one of us. And just as I said that, the lighting in one of the lights here in the office went out. That was interesting. The ancestors are with us. Our ancestors are with us. They're in our blood. They're in our bones. They call us to our path. And sometimes we remember, sometimes we don't remember, sometimes we're just discovering our path. And I do believe that our ancestors these days, in this time, they're reminding us to remain true to our soul's path. Because I do feel as though many of our ancestors gave up on their true soul's path for many different circumstances. And I believe they're calling us forward. They're calling us out to teach the good red road, to teach a good way of living, to teach connections with spirit, to be a healer, to be the best of what you know in your soul you are. And yet, for a lot of reasons, many people don't follow the path of their soul, even though they know the ancestors are tapping them on the shoulder, or somebody's tapping them on the shoulder and saying, hey, you know you have this gift, you know you have this talent, you have this knowledge, you have this wisdom. You know that you came here to share it. Why aren't you doing that? And why are you so concerned with it, what everybody else is saying? Why are you so concerned with what somebody's putting out on Facebook about that? Why are you worried about that? For me, right now, the ancestors are calling all of us to our higher calling, our highest calling, and holding the light while we do it. I mean, this is a really diverse time, and the diversity, I think, of the world right now is out in full color, and I love that for myself. You know, as an Army brat, I lived in a lot of different places. I'm blessed by that. I lived in a lot of different places, and I met a lot of amazing people from all different paths, from all over the world. And yes, I was blessed to be raised in a household with a father who taught us to respect all of those ways. And I realize not everybody was, but I do believe that right now we're getting to see the full color, breadth and depth and width of who we are, who it is on this grandmother earth. And called to exchange what we know, what our experiences are, what we feel. Kimberly's saying, so true. I have always been enamored by the colors of life, the colors of people, the colors of flowers, the diversity, the vibrancy of life. And we're being exposed to those places, of course, where those aren't honored. And that's everywhere. That's everywhere. But do we rise above that, and do we shine anyway? Do we spend time with our bloodline, with our ancestors, going more deeply into our own gifts, into our own talent, into our own wisdom sharing? I mean, you know, anyone who knows me knows that I don't shy away from sharing who I am. And for some people it's uncomfortable. For some other people it's cool. And yet I know that if I didn't do the work that I do with spirit, if I didn't write the books that I write and all that other stuff that I do here in the Enchanted Forest, I would not feel wholly myself. There would be a longing, an emptiness, a hollowness. And I think we've all felt that when we weren't doing or sharing or just being who we are. I think that's a lot of cause of depression and anxiety, is not being able to be authentic. And maybe just from not being open. Maybe it's scary, this new colorful world that's always been, but is being more fully revealed. Maybe that's scary for some people. Terry Ruel is on right after me at 11 o'clock, and she's going to be talking about, from her perspective as a psychologist, why don't they see what I see, or how I see it? Now we're all being shown pretty amazing things. And what I think is really fascinating for me is how we're coming to find out how much alike we really all are in some regards. We're different, which is the beauty of it. But the other side of that beauty is that really We're a whole lot alike if we're willing to take a look. If we're willing to take a look. Del Marie is saying, got interviewed by a Cambodian student last week by phone. We never met, but she surprised me by saying our ancestors led us to each other. Exactly. Our ancestors do lead us to one another. My ancestors led me to Del Marie and Barbara. They led me to all of that. They led me to that pipe. They led me to that way of walking. And, the beauty of that as well, there are many levels of beauty with all of that. I mean, I love my family out west. As I know now at this age that my Seminole and my Georgia Cherokee relatives all along were working behind the scenes to bring this, not wayward sheep, but whatever you would call me, this family member that decided to be sent out from the bloodline to, have this life experience. They were going to make sure that I would have that experience as well of that bloodline. And I find that fascinating, and it really, it brings me joy. It brings me joy, and my African ancestors would make sure that I would get to Egypt and that I would find myself in Nubia. One of my favorite places on Grandmother Earth is Nubia, where the blue race of people live, as they say. Their skin is so, so black, it's blue. It's astonishing. In the Temple of Abydos, and feeling absolutely at home. One of the beautiful things I think of is that I believe that we are all so diverse in our ancestry. We may have one predominant piece in this lifetime here, but the fact is we're made up of this wonderful tapestry. Where did the people come from first in your bloodline? Where were they first? Mine were in Sardinia and in the Congo. And from Sardinia and Congo, the little island of Sardinia off the boot of Italy, and the Congo. My mom's people, my dad's people. And off they went. And here we are. Isn't that marvelous? And all of the troubles that our ancestors lived through, some of the troubles that we've lived through, I think if we allow those troubles to make us better people, I think that's the point. I mean, the Buddha teaches that the belly of compassion is made through the troubles. It's made through the troubles of our life. And if we can take those troubles and they make them part of our compassion, and we make them part of our compassion, we get that big Hote Buddha belly of compassion. I think that's what our ancestors are leading us toward right now. It's funny, during the holy days, Hanukkah begins this week. Yesterday was the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. On Saturday is the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Hanukkah, of course, begins this very week. We're right ensconced in the holy days, and we tend to remember our ancestors at this time. We use their recipes. We make things and put them on our dinner table. Whether we're celebrating the solstice, the return of the long days here in the Northern Hemisphere, or we're celebrating Christmas or Hanukkah or just a million other things that are going on at this season of light. We tend to think of our ancestors at this time of the year. And oftentimes we bring part of their ceremonies or part of their food, which is part of the ceremony, into our home and into our practice. This is an extraordinary year with the pandemic and all. And I think giving us an opportunity to spend a little more time with our ancestors. Good morning, Katie Battle. Hey, Tara Rietberg. So how do our ancestors let us know that they're with us? Well, the signs and wonders are amazing. And we can be talking about ancestors, those that we love. Good morning, Jess. Those that we love that have recently passed on. They give us signs all the time. But what I want to say about that is sometimes people will say, well, how come Dana, my auntie or my mom or somebody isn't giving me regular signs? Don't they love me? And that's a question I get asked quite often. Don't they love me? They're not giving me signs like they used to, or they're just not giving me very many signs. Well, we have to remember that life goes on for our ancestors. They're really actually not just kind of hanging out on the family cloud system up there with a guy with a gray beard. They're really active. Our ancestors are active. They're active through us. They're active with us. Some of our ancestors are have returned to the illuminated realms, as I call them. They're in that place of our deepest, oldest, fantabulous ancestors. They're ascended, right? They're there in the home of the nebulous of our bloodlines. I call those the illuminated ones, the illumined ones. And between us and those illumined ones are all of our ancestors, our beloveds that have passed on and are making their way back to that illuminated place with the ancient ones. And so they're busy. What are they busy doing? Well, they're busy making their way back to that state of illumination, I believe, as I've been taught. Some continue that path and they just keep on keeping on. Some, I think, choose perhaps a path of reincarnating quickly. There are many streams of thought about that, but ultimately I believe that we all find our way back to a state of illumination. Good morning, Laura. Bruce always says, food, family, and fun. Bruce always says, that's Bruce. That's Bruce. Carlo Joe is saying they have work to do with themselves and with others. Exactly. When we have this human experience, and this human experience is not for ninnies, right? Me and Linda Grizak, we've been saying that for many years. This experience of being human is not for the faint of heart. It is not. This bad boy is a roller coaster ride. High highs, low lows, some hairpin twists and turns. Sometimes you're on that, that straight track, that plateau. And then wham, right? Buckle up. Buckle up. And sometimes people will have this adventurous life, and we see it on the outside. They have adventure. I like adventure. So anybody who knows me knows that my life is adventurous because I like to have adventure. Some people, their life is more quiet about the roller coaster ride. Sometimes it's very internal. It's quiet. Not quiet on the inside, but it's quiet on the outside. And so we can sometimes think, well, aren't they having just a wonderful monotone life where nothing ever happens? Well, we don't know that because on the inside, we never know what somebody is going through. But having said that, at the end of our days, we don't just cast all that off. Wow, that was a wild ride. Glad that's over with. We decided to have this life experience for a reason. And when we shed this human vehicle, our spirit, our soul takes stock. Man, what just happened to me? What was that? What did I learn? What was the experience? What did I leave behind? What am I taking with me on this journey? How am I informing, right, the vastness of my soul through this experience? How am I informing the vastness of me? What will I take forward into perhaps another lifetime? I need to mull on that relationship and how we came together to make that happen or not happen. And that can take a long time. It's like peeling away the layers of an onion, looking at it, chewing on it. I loved listening to an Ojibwe holy man, medicine man, last summer, describing in his tradition what happens when we pass on after those 4 days. And the medicine man told us, all of us there at that sacred fire, that, the first thing that the loved one will do is stop at the at the strawberry patch. And at that strawberry patch, you'll be met by a shining one. And they'll discuss this life. And when all of that is done, then he'll move on to the blueberry bushes, the place of the blueberries, right? All of the medicines of the Ojibwe people. And it's a process, and he described it, and I listened to this beautiful young holy man talking about the journey of the soul back to that place of illumination. And all the while, yes, with the ability to reach out to the rest of us, to say, keep on, keep going. But at the same time, doing his own work, his own processing, making this human life something of value beyond what it is that we're experiencing here. It has value to our soul, to our overall experience. I think that just being alive is the will of our ancestors too, says Del. There's no doubt about that. I'm pretty sure that I'm a living testimony to that in my own bloodline. I am glad that I come from very hearty and strong stock, right? Having been sold on the market twice from the beginning of my life, put up for sale at the moment of my birth, and then resold, literally, in a motel room in Memphis, Tennessee. I know, looking back on all of my years, my ancestors have been right there. Sometimes they come to us in our dreams. I remember the first time I saw my biological father in a dream. I remember it as though it was 5 minutes ago. And years later, when I finally, saw a photo of his face, there was the man that came to me in my dream. And the irony was that my dad, the Sarge, in the dream, introduced me to my biological father in that moment. He said, "Honey, you need to meet somebody now. It's time." And I said, "Well, Daddy-o, who do you want me to meet?" And he said, "I want you to meet your father." And I looked across the table at this beautiful brown-skinned, black-haired man in his military uniform. And I knew that that was my father. And then when I brought it up to the Sarge, he said, "Well, isn't that something that I was able to do that while I'm still here and he must be there?" Our will to be here sometimes is strong within ourselves and bolstered by our ancestors, but why do we continue the bloodline? Some bloodlines end. They're the last of a certain line. If you've ever encountered anybody who's the last of, which is interesting. It's an interesting thought to be the last of. Sometimes I think that we're here on behalf of our ancestors, maybe to heal ancestral traumas, ancestral patterns, to expand ancestral talents, gifts, the light that our ancestors bring to earth from whatever place they come from in the seas and oceans of life, no matter where they're from. Maybe we've come here to rectify a few things or to bring balance, to work through and heal the angst in our blood and our bones. And where does that come from? I think that whenever we heal angst in our blood and our bones, it gives our gifts and talents the opportunity to really shine, to flow through us, unencumbered by. To really work through it. And that's not an easy task. Sometimes our ancestors are calling us in our blood and bones, trying to get us to work through something, rather than to continue grousing about it or grumbling about it or crying all around about it. They're actually asking us to do the work. Call a therapist. Get some medicine work done, maybe, whatever that is for you in your shamanic or earth tradition. People can go on and on and on and on and on about what has been done to their ancestors, but how are they in their lives trying to, for themselves, balance that? Even a little bit of work. Maybe it's the balancing act of telling other people the truth about something that happened. That's healing when the truth comes out. It's healing learning the truth. It can be shocking when we learn the truth about our ancestors. Some people are getting their ancestry kits and they're not happy about what they're finding at all. They're really discontented, some people, by what they're finding. Not me, man. I want to dive headlong in. I want to know the history, the good, the bad, the indifferent. Somebody said to me, so what does it feel like, to come from a bloodline of slaves? I said, well, first of all, my people that were slaves, my grandmothers and my grandfathers and my aunties and my uncles and my cousins that come from that stock were far more than that. Yes, that is an ugly period of history, but they're way more than that. I want to get beyond that piece. I want to know who they were as people. I'm working on that right now. I want to know who they were as people. I want to know their traditions. I want to know exactly where they came from in the Congo, in Madagascar. That's what I want to know. I want to get back past this label of. I want to know about their magic. I want to know their songs. That's what I want to know. So if that's uncomfortable, I'm well past that label of a period in their history. They're much more than that. And it's as though the moment that you say that, at least the moment that I said that, when I, really worked through this idea of that and the horror, the abject horror of that life that many of my ancestors had. When I get back past that, not negate it, not ignore it, obviously, but to look at them as individuals. It's been fascinating for me on Ancestry.com for faces to pop up. You know how you get a new relative? And how many of them pop up and they look exactly like me, only with dark brown skin and dark brown eyes. I'm like, wow. I want to know about that relative that you and I both look like. I want to know the songs they sung. I want to know the traditions. I want to know about my relatives in the Highlands of Scotland. I want to know about that. And the thing is that our ancestors are so alive and they are so active that when we say, I really want to know about that, or when we're moved by, and I want to know more, it presents itself. Del Marie is saying, I hear you. My ancestors were more than savages. That's right. When I think about all of my relatives that were moved from Georgia on that Trail of Tears all the way to Oklahoma, and literally my mother is buried 5 feet, maybe, from the sign that says, this is the original Trail of Tears. I kid you not. They're in the corner of Alabama and Georgia. My mother's headstone, my baby brother's headstone, and 5 feet away, here is the original Trail of Tears. And I looked at that. Todd showed that to me. And I thought to myself in the moment, here's my biological mother and my baby brother lying side by side, 5 feet from the sign and a trail. And I just stood there and looked at it and wondered how many of my family members, of my ancestors, walked this space, walked this trail from their home in Georgia all the way to Oklahoma. I have relatives in Oklahoma and Texas. How many of them walked right by the place that my future biological mother would be buried? You can't make that up. It was no coincidence. And to just be with that. I think all of us, well, I know all of us, from whatever indigenous people we come from, there have been trials and tribulations. You know, the trials and tribulations of the Scots people, the Scottish people, everywhere, you name it. You name it. There's been trials, tribulations, horrors for everybody. Do we remain in that? Or I think we're being called to get past the way that we see somebody just because we heard, or just because a community has been known as savages or slaves or what, fill in the blank. Fill in the blank. For me, it's about, what do our ancestors want us to know now? We can all acknowledge everybody's been through a really rough time in their ancestry. Some people are still going through a really crappy time. Our ancestors are urging us to help them, to get over whatever we think based on what we think we know. If nothing else, just be a good person, right? Be a compassionate person. At the very least, our ancestors would want us to be a kind and compassionate human being. And that's not always easy, being kind and compassionate. I know that. I think at the very least, our ancestors would want us to take a look and do our own interior work. Every ounce of healing that we do for ourselves and every ounce of compassion that we display in this lifetime for others, we're helping seven generations forward and 7 generations back. And the ripple effect goes on. I think that's pretty fantastic. Every morning when I come into this space, I light a candle to my ancestors. And I thank them. I thank them. And I know that on some level I'm thanking myself, because I'm pretty sure that I'm a reincarnated one of my ancestors. I think a pretty tough old bird when it comes down to it. I think I was probably somewhere in the in-between going, all right, we got to get some stuff done. We have got to get some stuff done. So I'm going to go back, and here's what's going to happen. Because we're going to realign and rebalance some things, and we're not going to be ashamed of the spiritual gifts of this bloodline. We're not going to be ashamed of that. We're going to walk that path with Spirit in a good way, in an honorable way. Not everyone is going to understand it. That's okay, but we're going to reignite the spirituality in the bloodline. We're going to reignite the spirituality in the bloodline, not the religion. We're going to reignite the spirituality in the bloodline. And you, Dana, will be the last of our bloodline to be sold at birth and sold again. You did that. No one else is going to do that. You're the last. You're going to wrap that bad boy up and have some fun along the way. When we learn about the spirituality of our ancestors, especially those forms of spirituality that were stomped out, stamped out, made to go underground, when we dive into that study, when we bring it back to life, even just in understanding it in our own life, it reignites that flame of spirituality. I look at it like this in my own brain, the way my brain works, is that as I'm sitting here in this room and my beautiful pipe bag that Del Marie beaded for me is right here smack in front of me with my chanupa. And at the same time, I've got this beautiful black Madonna and some objects that I got while I was in Egypt, and beautiful icons, etc. A little bit of Scotland in here, some of the Netherlands in here. And I honor it every day. Every day I honor it. I light a candle every day. And I give thanks for it. And when I'm actively practicing, I'm actively with those prayers, I see, and this is how I just see it, it's just me, I see like this flame, this gentle flame of light that ignites within me, and I see all of my ancestors in a circle with me. And when I am in the prayer of and in a way of, so if I'm lighting a candle for somebody, and with that candle is the Black Madonna statue, because that's what's needed at that time. Or if I'm praying with my chanupa, whatever it is, I see all of the heart lights of every one of my ancestors standing in the circle. It goes around. It's like all of the lights gently go on. And there's an energy, there's a circuitry. There's a circuitry of light right there in the inner sanctum, right, the temple. And then I know that I'm working with all of my ancestors. My ancestors are there in spirituality and spirit with me. Not that I can't take them to Catholic Mass with me. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying they're not there as well. But this is different. Here in my home, on the land, wherever I'm called to be, I bring them in. And it lights up within me, which means it lights up within them, and it brings healing. It brings healing to everybody who is still working on their stuff. To my ancestor who was hung by the neck for being a witch in Connecticut in the 1600s. Every time I'm with spirit in a good way, she receives healing and honoring. And I know not everybody understands my pathway. Not everybody understands your pathway. That's okay. You didn't come here to walk anybody else's path, and they didn't come here to walk yours. You came here to do that. Aw, thanks, Angie. She's saying that's beautiful, Dee. I see the web of those who are part of me. all joined by a thread of light, hope, and love. Yes, Carla Jo. And sometimes in this work, as we begin to really understand the depth of ancestral spirituality, sometimes we do need an assist from somebody like Terry Ruel or Nicole Fix, or somebody who can help our mind and our emotions wrap itself around what's going on. The first time I went to a powwow, many, many, many years ago in Grand Rapids at the Three Fires powwow, I stood watching the grand entry for the very first time in my life. The kids were toddlers, and the drum started, the center drum started, and the sage was wafting. And I stood there. It was one of those moments, I think we've all had them, where out of the blue, the tears started to fall, and I could not possibly stop them. And my husband at the time, Steve, looked at me and said, "This is familiar to you." He was raised by a very Scorpio mom. My mother-in-law was very Scorpio and very intuitive in her own right. He said, "This is familiar to you. It's moving you." And I couldn't even speak. And on the ride home, after partaking of a whole day of the gathering, he looked at me and he said, "I hope one day you're able to meet your family, Denise, because what I just saw happen is down in your soul somewhere." And that's when he and I began pursuing finding my biological family. It was all because of a powwow in that moment. The ancestors speak to us through the music. If I hear bagpipes, I'm just done. Laura Smith, you remember when we were in the Highlands of Scotland and we were in this beautiful old place and a bagpiper came into the library, the room in the home that was the library, and we all just sat there, you, me, Stephen, I think Nikki was there, and the old gentleman came in and started playing. Tara, maybe you were there at that time, I'm not sure. And we all just sat there. The ancestors speak to us in our blood and bones when we hear the music of the drum or the bagpipes or violin, piano, whatever it happens to be. They speak to us when we hear Latin, right? For me, there's nothing like a Latin Mass. I don't even know that those are done anymore. Mass is said in Latin. Sitting in frankincense and myrrh, right, at a midnight Mass done in Latin. Midnight Vespers. I went to one of those a few years back in Jackson, Michigan. I went on a silent retreat. A Romanian convent. Silent. The only time they spoke was at Vespers, and I needed to be part of that. So there I sat in this teeny tiny little chapel in Jackson, Michigan, listening to Vespers in Romanian. You could hardly see the nuns because there was so much frankincense and myrrh in the air, and they were head to toe in black wool. And then, Lordy, at the end of it, I was the only person at Vespers. And they knew that I spoke English, of course, so then they sang, of all things, of course they did, they sang the Ave Maria to me in English, very broken English, but it was spectacular. And that was another one of those moments. Sitting in a cloud of frankincense and myrrh, chanting, that beautiful Gregorian chant of the Ave. Whew, that's ancient. Took me way back to somewhere in Nubia and Egypt and Sardinia. That's how they talk to us, everybody. Sometimes they come in our dreams and they just, they present things. But oftentimes these days they're calling us, they're drawing us. And it's okay that maybe they're taking you away from for a bit of exploration. Right? I can't leave that pew, Dana, because if I leave that pew and I find something out in the forest, what will people think if I find God, Goddess in the forest and not just in a pew? Well, why are you worried about what other people will think if you find divinity in the forest or in a sweat lodge? That's my first question. And number two, how do you think Creator feels about you finding Creator in the forest and not just in a pew? And maybe, how do you think Creator feels about you finding Creator near the ocean or on a long walk in a park or listening to a beautiful score of music or being with animals? How do you think Creator feels about you finding Creator in all of those places too? I'm feeling way better about knowing that Creator understands that I find Creator in all things and in all places and not just in a pew. And yes, of course, you can find Creator while sitting in a pew. Not saying you don't. You get the gist. The ancestors are calling us to explore, to share, to heal. These are the holy days. This is the time of light. It's the time of the evening angels, the angels of evening, to visit us. Just like they did with Ebenezer Scrooge, those angels of evening, having us take a look. They're asking us to come out of our cloister, to maybe turn on some Scottish music. We have bagpipe music here in our home, or some Irish music. Of course, we have Native American music. My husband is an amazing drummer and singer. And sometimes we just cue up some Lorena McKennitt to bring the Highlands into our home. Whatever you do this holy day season, bear in mind, even if you're at the holy day holiday table with not as many people this year, understand that your table is very full. And it will become even more full in your home when you invite your ancestors to spend these holy days with you. Bring them in, light a candle, sing their songs, learn about them, explore them. Talk to them. Drum, chant. Right? What are you going to cue up on your stereo system? Pandora. Bring them in that way. It's an extraordinary year. And yet there are blessings if we look for them and if we look to create them. We look to create them. Trust me, if you bring the ancestors in, they'll let you know that they're there. They're really good at that. Maybe this year is not about having dinner with a table full of physical bodies. Maybe it's about having dinner with those in their non-physical bodies in order to learn more about who we are and who we've been and who we're becoming. Just a thought. Just a thought. With that, everybody, I'm out of here and getting ready to queue up my wonderful friend Terry Ruel, who's going to expand upon this and talk about, why don't people see what we see? Why do people have a different view? By golly, it's clear as day. Why don't they see it like I do? And why can't I see it the way they do? That's what's up next. So blessings be, everybody. Get out there and shine.